We're theme park families.
Theme park families.
We're theme park families.
Won't you join us now?
We're theme park families.
Thanks for joining us, we aim to please.
If roller coasters got you weak in the knees,
We're theme park families.
if you wanna find the best dessert or
Take a potty break with privacy,
find a coaster that is tame for little ones,
or one to make you scream.
we're theme park families.
Everybody's having bad babies.
Rescuing you all from my surgeries.
We're theme park families.
We're theme park families.
Press the space bar. Yeah.
Yay!
Hey everyone, Adam here.
And Andrew.
And thanks for checking in with us again for another episode of Theme Park Families. We're so psyched that we've had such great reactions to our new series so far called These Enthusiasts Really Love Their Coasters. We've gotten a ton of great feedback and heard from a number of people who really enjoyed the show, and we've reached out to other people as well for future episodes. So this is something that we're really going to get rolling, as we've got a number in the pipe here. So that's really kind of cool that people are enjoying that so far. But certainly, if you have a similar story as well, if there's a coaster that you like to marathon that you are associated with, let us know. Hit us up on Facebook or Twitter, or email us at themeparkfamilies@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now, not to put you on the spot, Bud, but we always say that what is our favorite part about being in the theme park industry these last 4 years?
Probably the people.
We talk about rides a lot, but the people that we've met, not only through the Costa Radio meetups, but now our growing podcast network of friends, including Ride This 1 and 2, and In the Loop, and Coaster Crew, and Hobo Po, and the Coaster Talk podcast, and Coaster Studios, and on and on and on, and Ace, and Civil Gore, all of those things, absolutely. All those people, our list of friends keeps growing and growing all the time, which is just so cool. But today, we have a special guest to add to our list of buddies, an internet star who was kind enough to reach out to me on Twitter a couple of months ago saying that he listened to us, he liked our stuff, and we are really happy to have, drumroll please, Rue. Yes, Drew the Intern. Thanks so much for joining us today, Drew.
The views and opinions of the hosts are those of the hosts and not any company which they are affiliated with.
Hello, thanks for having me on the show.
It is absolutely our pleasure. It's great to have two Andrews on the show today, and right off the bat, congratulations on being a new daddy.
Thank you. Congratulations is probably exactly the correct word. You definitely feel like you accomplished something, especially surviving the first 3 months.
Oh my gosh, those first 3 months are so hard, and then once the smiles start coming and accomplishments happening and personality forms, life really does start getting easier.
Yeah, no, I mean, I gotta say, he's just now starting to laugh, and to me, that's like one of the best parts of the day when I see my son, he's like smiling, I realize he knows who I am, and he's not just like blank stares out into space. It's pretty fantastic.
It is. Those are some amazing moments, absolutely, those smiles. And then eventually they get to almost teen years and say, Dad, I hate you, and stuff like that. So enjoy. No, that never happens, does it? All right, so you definitely enjoy these moments now. It's such cool times. And just thinking about it, of the change that you've gone through in the last couple of months, or year or so, we've had a new marriage, new kid, new job. It's been a wild stretch of time for Drew the Intern, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's really funny. Time Hop gives you like a picture back of your life prior, and I'm like, who is this guy? I feel like I am a totally different individual, and my life is totally different than it was, say, 2 years ago.
It really is wild that way, thinking of what your stories were like and what kind of things you did, and driving 15 hours without sleeping to get to a park, and hanging out with these friends and drinking certain beverages all night long, and realizing now what fatherhood is like and how much things have changed. It's wild how one or two decisions can just change your life so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are going to get to a lot of stuff because I think there are probably a lot of fans of yours who, like me, have only been in this industry a couple of years who don't know a lot of the background, like how you started with In the Loop and how you got into the whole industry and other things like college degrees and jobs and all that. So definitely we want to get into a lot of that stuff, undoubtedly, to get a lot of that background in. But before we do get there are a lot of other things we need to do. And if you can believe it, Drew, Andrew hasn't listened really to any episodes from In the Loop or Ride This One, which he's actually been on both of those before, but he hasn't had a chance to listen to those yet.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah, I told him, and it's funny because he's on every episode of Ride This One, his voice is on there, but we joke about that with Slater, that he won't be able to listen to any of his episodes that he's on for a long time, at least at this point. Funny enough, we've been on, 3 or 4 In the Loops. In some ways, I feel like we deserve some kind of In the Loop jacket or something. You've been on at least 3 or 4 with Clint at this point.
Probably. Well, I think it's probably more than that.
More than that, yeah, something like that. Our little mini episodes that we recorded with Clint. So he actually saw at Drunken Vengeance when we met the legend. I introduced myself as Adam, and this is Andrew from In the Loop. He didn't. he didn't feel.
You probably confused him a little bit.
He was very confused, and certainly confused at seeing someone who was so young and short. I don't think he has a lot of experience with younger people, but that's a whole nother story. Well, I can assure you, as I just finished up listening to your most recent episode with Slater, this episode will be slightly different than that one.
Yes. That episode might have been the most inappropriate thing In the Loop has ever put out, ever.
And that's saying a lot, because you've certainly had some interesting stories, so to say that that's the most inappropriate. And I think Slater was pretty tame on that episode.
Yes.
He was on one of ours pretty recently, and I did a couple of beeps that I needed to throw in there, but I didn't think he actually had anything that horrific on there, so, but I think
there's a couple of things that didn't end up making it.
Oh, wait, are you talking about editing?
Sort of. It wasn't purposeful editing. It was, I was on dad duty at the time, and Holland Blitz sort of interrupted every single one of Slater's good punchlines for his stories, and obviously if you couldn't hear the punchline because there was a baby screaming, you obviously had to eliminate the entire joke, and so there was probably 3 or 4 really inappropriate things that just completely had to get cut out because my kid wouldn't allow it.
Wait a second, I think that sounds like Baby Genius or something. I think he realizes at this point, he's heard Dad record a couple times, he's like, whoa, Dad, this is crossing the line, you're going to lose a lot of people, so I'm going to scream so this doesn't make the episode. I have a feeling that's kind of what was going on there.
Probably.
That's pretty funny. Who knows? That would be cool to add into an extra kind of bonus episode if that audio still actually existed. There's so much more that we really want to discuss. Before we do that, we have to kick off with a segment that In the Loop knows nothing about, and that would be called Andrew's News. The whole starting the show with the news in the industry, something that In the Loop never does, right?
Are you referring to the fact that we always have to do a 45-minute to an hour discussion of what we've done the past 2 weeks?
Oh, yeah, that too. What we've done, exactly. It's sometimes far longer than others, although that was pretty sad for Slater, and I think that's going to be changing up a lot where he's like, yeah, I haven't done anything part-related stuff, but it is coming for him. This is the year that he's going to hit it hard. So yes, and then you eventually get to the news, but let's kick it off with some Andrew's News.
If not riding coasters will give you the blues, it's Andrew's News. As tweeted out from the account at Drew the Intern on Twitter, which currently has over 1,100 followers, Ballin, Six Flags Magic Mountain officially announced that Green Lantern would be permanently closing, which led to absolutely no one creating an online petition to keep it open. Cedar Point fanboys rejoiced as it brings the Holy Lane one coaster closer to regaining their title. In an interesting side note, the ride was seen cycling yesterday by people in the park.
All right, so did that surprise you at all, Drew? Green Lantern closing permanently.
You know, I was driving to work when I was thinking about this because my life is way too focused on roller coasters. So as my drive to work also usually consists of me thinking about this hobby.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've been to the park since when it was running since I think 2015 at this point.
Okay.
So it's been standing for well over a year without any sort of movement or anything like that. So I'm not really surprised it's gone. I think my biggest surprise is that it's gone. They announced it's closed before their new ride, West Coast Racers, opened. So now it doesn't really count as a roller coaster at that park.
Exactly.
I would have thought they would have marketed, West Coast Racers as their 20th coaster, but I don't think they really can now.
Well, that's the weird thing. It's not like it would change anything. People aren't coming to the park to say, hey, is Green Lantern open? So if you just leave it like that and nothing has to change statistic-wise, other than that fact that might change things a little bit there was a report that yesterday that they were cycling some trains through on Green Lantern. Did you see that report?
Yeah, apparently that was for La Ronde. From what I'm understanding, that was the folks from La Ronde were watching the ride cycle. So you might see that in Canada in a couple of years.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Well, that is interesting. And it's perfect for La Ronde, actually. And we talked about it on a really old episode, but we talked about that is our #1 worst experience at a theme park ever. And so the punchline to that joke, I've also told it on Ride This One, the punchline to that joke is we rushed out of La Ronde to get back to the Great Escape. That is the punchline. That's how horrible our time was. Now, we haven't been to Magic Mountain yet, and I think the plan is August is our first time. So to you, was Green Lantern as bad as everybody whines about?
That ride was awful.
Okay, it really is. Now, I don't remember. Have you done an S&S respin to compare?
So I have not.
That's what I thought. That's why I was hesitant with that question.
It's funny how many there are now,
Yep.
and how I haven't ridden one. I have this weird problem in America at this point where I've been to almost every park. So when a park puts in a free spin, I'm like, it's not really something that's going to get me to go back to it. So I'm sure at some point I'll go there. Like, my parents live up in New England, so
Yep.
I'm sure I'll get to Six Flags New England and ride it at some point, or something. It's never been on the agenda, because as new rides open that are more interesting, like things like, I don't know, Mystic Timbers and Cannibal Out West and things like that, those rides open, I end up traveling to those because they're different and not the same free spin.
Right, which makes sense. What do you think of the free spins, bud?
I like them, except for the one that we did at Fiesta Texas, because that one was definitely more intense, but it whipped my head up and down against the seat, and it really hurt.
We were amazed at how different it was, that original model versus the one at Great Adventure, New England, that the cars were at a bit of a different height and angle, and yeah, the one at Fiesta Texas, which I enjoyed more because it was more violent. We had way more spins, and it was way more forceful, although you did bash your head a bit more. But yeah, I think they were a ton of fun, so I just had to imagine that intimate style was just horrific in comparison. I think you'll like them, and eventually, I'm sure when Over Georgia does get one, that's where you'll probably wind up doing it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to happen eventually. I don't know if necessarily this year is the year where I end up over at a park with one of these free spins, but I won't be surprised when I ride it.
Yeah, I think if this is the summer that you do sort of make it to the Northeast area, if you do make it to that Pennsylvania trip, I think that we can get you on one. At some point, getting you to Great Adventure and getting you to ride one. That's a possibility, so I think you'll like it. Very, very tame in comparison.
Well, that is good, because definitely remember smacking my head around. And also the one thing that just sticks in my mind of Green Lantern is I struggled so hard to get into the seat, because it's like the inverted coaster seat that it was just up so high that we all needed to use step stools to get into them. And I'm like, I'm not like a ginormous, really tall guy.
Right.
I've never struggled to climb up into an inverted coaster seat before. So this one, the fact that I struggled to get into it, I was like, this is ridiculous. And that has always stuck in my head as a poor design flaw there as well.
Well, it's interesting that you note that. So the newer models, like the one at Great Adventure, I kind of, at least the first year it was open, by now he could do it on his own, but I had to lift Andrew up to get him in. It was so high. And that's the thing we noticed when we went to Fiesta Texas with their Batman model, that it was so low, it was almost like a lowrider. It was almost weird to get into it. They made that change there. So yeah, that's an interesting observation in terms of the height of that seat, and that certainly affected it. And it's cool to hear about that La Ronde rumor, because if they're the ones to buy it, it actually might make that park worse. If it was possible.
Copperhead Strike opened this week to the media. Pass holder preview night and opening weekend to solid reviews. Many people are considering it a solid, fun ride, while not intense, but a positive experience nonetheless.
What are you hearing, Drew, about Copperhead Strike with this opening weekend?
Yeah, so I don't tend to buy anyone's hype the first weekend because everybody's overly excited for a new ride, and I feel like expectations end up higher, and then as the ride settles in through the rest of the season, people end up, comes back to earth where the ride actually ranks with people. But it seems to be everyone is pretty excited about it, and lots of positive things everyone's saying. Everyone says that the launch tunnel is better than the shed at Kings Island, so all of that are good things.
What are you laughing at over there?
I don't know.
Well, how do you feel about the shed? Are you laughing at the shed?
I like it.
We love the shed. We're big fans of the shed.
I didn't know
and Drew, I think you're a big fan of the shed too.
I said it was my favorite part of the ride was the shed, and everyone called me crazy, and I'm like, what would you rather do, just sit in the baking sun? Like, we are in shade, and there's things to look at. During a normal operating movement where they're loading the next train, so you're just sitting on a brake run, and hey, now you have cool things going on? Like, how is that not really awesome? But everybody's like, oh, that was so dumb. I can't believe it was just small props and a couple of TV screens. And I'm like, this is not Walt Disney World we're looking at. We're not looking for like an immersive experience. I know everyone was thinking it was going to be like a hidden barrel roll or a drop track or something like that. If that was unrealistic expectation.
Totally.
It is exactly what I thought it was, and I thought it was great.
How many other scenes like that are there in regular Cedar Fair Six Flags parks that have a coaster that have a scene that's way better than that? Go ahead, list them.
It doesn't exist.
And that's what shocks me. I thought there were some great touches. All the spray-painted Don't Go at the Shed on the outside wall. The little radio that's playing either Hall & Oates, You Make My Dream Come True. There's some little touches like that. And then, the screens were fine. But it sounds like people are saying it's all about the hang time, and that's why it's good that the launches aren't intense, because if the launches were intense, you don't get that hang time. So that's kind of what I hear about it from a lot of people.
Yeah, it seems like a solid addition to that park that needs more solid additions. Because, I mean, I love Carowinds, don't get me wrong. Fury is like one of the greatest coasters. I think, ironically, I'm wearing a Fury t-shirt right now. But, so, like, I love Carowinds. But for a while, they had that, like, 1-2-3 punch with Fury, Intimidator, and Afterburn.
Yep.
And then everything else was just, it was okay. It wasn't, it wasn't, like, a greatest collection out there.
And the one problem about that park is they don't really have enough things for, like, 48-inch riders. Like, they have, like, the 2 loopers, and that's pretty much it. And otherwise, there's just 54 things that are good there. Like, they need more stuff for other kids.
It's a great point, and that's something that Drew's going to have to start thinking about here in the next bunch of years as little baby Holland Blitz starts to ride stuff. That Carowinds is one of the worst parks in terms of that height limit, and it's not something you think of when you're an adult on your own. It's just not something that you would even think of. But when you think about the number of 54-inch coasters that park has, it's a pretty huge amount. And so, as you said, Carolina Cyclone, which isn't a great arrow. Flying Cobros. I like that. Cobros, where are the Cobros? And then Carolina Gold Rusher, their little Arrow Mine Train.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not a great park for kids. So adding a 40, well, I don't even know, actually. I haven't even thought of that until this moment. With Copperhead Strike, it's hype because Time Traveler was 51 inches, which is about the weirdest height I've ever heard in my life. I've never heard of another coaster being 51.
Rip Ride Rocket, actually.
Okay, a place we've never been to, so there's our second one. Rip Ride Rocket, 51, which is Premier?
Mauer.
Mauer, okay, gosh, 51 inches, so there's our second one. So Copperhead Strike, I don't know what the height requirement is on it. I haven't looked.
All right, you're the teacher here. It's 4 feet 4 inches.
4 feet 4 inches, well, we know about that. Interesting, 4 feet 4 inches, that's shocking.
52.
Very good, and he knows that too, because
I'm 4'5".
So 52 inches, that's surprising. I think of that as more of a family-friendly type ride, even though it has inversions. 52 inches, that's Maverick. And that's Top Thrill. So, and I think of that as way calmer, but of course it's all about the restraints. So I'm surprised that that's 52. But then again, as Time Traveler at 51, same manufacturer, there we go. Do you think that's a good move, that they made it a 52-inch?
Not really. I sort of had, so talking about Maverick and Dragster, and you were mentioning Carowinds, how it doesn't really have a lot of stuff that's 48. I think of the same thing at Cedar Point, but below 48. Cedar Point pretty much has nothing to do besides like the train or like really kid rides, but like once you outgrow like the kiddie attractions, there's really not a whole lot for you to be able to do until you hit the 54-inch mark. And so I don't know. I think with Gerstlauer making things like Fire Chaser Express, that is a 39-inch height requirement.
Yep.
It blows my mind that not more parks are thinking, let's get a ride where we can put everybody on it.
Right, so that 39 that you said, 39 to 52, that's such a huge gap. That's insane. And and you certainly know better than most. I believe both Iron Dragon and Cedar Creek Mine Ride both had lower height requirements less than a decade ago. And then they've jacked both of them up to 48, right?
Yes, they went with brand consistency on that one because the aero suspendeds at Kings Island and Canada's Wonderland were all 48, which are much more thrilling attractions than Iron Dragon. But yeah, so they bumped that up.
But with that brand consistency, you know better than pretty much everyone, what is it? Maybe 5% of people travel to multiple parks and 95 stay at their own home park? I have to imagine those percentages are something like that.
Oh my god. So like, I worked at Cedar Point and was trying to use my ID to get into Worlds of Fun. They had no idea what Cedar Point even was. And it was like I had to get a manager involved because the supervisor had no idea what to do.
It's so funny that you said it. I could believe it wholeheartedly because since we do travel to all the Cedar Fair parks, how many times did we have a cup from another park?
Yeah.
And they'd say to us, okay, once we were at, where was it?
It was King's Dominion,
Yep.
and we had a Canada's Wonderland cup. I went up to one of the people, and they said, you can't use that cup. You can only use it for water.
Yeah, she said you can only get water. And he was like a little upset. He was much younger. And so I had to walk over to her and say, oh no, Canada's Wonderland is part of your company and he's allowed to use the cup. So yeah, it's funny like that. And I can believe it. Like Cedar Point, what is that from someone in Kansas City?
Yeah, but meanwhile, on the same spectrum, one year we were at King's Dominion and we're like, we're going to go eat in the employee cafeteria because that was part of the right of working for the different companies. Mm-hmm. So we're dressed as guests, just walking around backstage of King's Dominion, just looking for their employee cafeteria, and just stopped a random ride host. I was like, hey, where's the employee cafeteria? And they just pointed us in the right direction and like didn't question a thing of why these four guests are just walking around backstage looking for the cafeteria.
Oh my gosh, yeah, whereas normally that would be a little upsetting, These people don't seem to be allowed to be here. I think at Cedar Point, right, there would be security coming at you at that point. A little bit of a difference there. It's pretty crazy stuff. That is wild. So yeah, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a great decision for that park to make it a 52-inch ride. And with its lack of intensity, it's kind of a shame that it is.
Plus it scares me.
Yeah.
Because the ride seems to go, part of the main elements are the hang time through the inversion.
Yeah.
Which, what are they going to do come, like, Winterfest, when it's colder and trains are running slower? Like, they're marketing this ride that it's going to be open, but I don't know. I don't know if I see it. I think you're going to see this ride while it's marketed to be open. I don't think it'll be open on any of the, like, remotely chilly days during Winterfest.
Right, that potential there of it stalling out, I could see that being a big problem. Although those nights in Charlotte don't tend to get all that cold compared to a lot of the other parks, yeah, that could be a huge issue because they're not going to want to deal with valing all that much. But it's that interesting difference between the Six Flags holiday events and the Cedar Fair ones. That tremendous difference of almost every coaster at Six Flags parks operating versus one or two at the Cedar Fair parks. That's kind of a weird strategy that they both have, right?
I think that's an upset. I think it should be the other way around.
The Cedar Fair?
Knowing the two park chains.
In what way? Why?
Well, a lot of people say, like, Six Flags operations aren't as well, or, like...
And the maintenance and all that.
Maintenance and stuff.
Yep. With some of the rattle. So yeah, that's interesting. I hope it's a trend, Drew, as we go along, that these Cedar Fair parks will start opening a few more coasters at least for their parks during those events.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason why I've never done one. It's hard for me to justify leaving nice, warm, sunny Orlando, Florida to go to a seasonal Christmas event to ride one ride.
It's hard to justify that, although I'll say they do a lot more with atmosphere. What they lack in terms of having coasters and major rides open, they develop more lands that are lighted in a specific way, like a North Pole land, and then like a Christmas tree land, and all that kind of stuff. So they do a lot more of that kind of stuff. Again, whether that justifies a 5-hour drive for you or not, that is a whole nother question. But they really do look pretty. More charm, more atmosphere at the Cedar Fair park.
and they added a lot of shows for like the Christmas events.
That's a great point. Kings Dominion was our last one, and wow, they had 6 different stages with shows on them. So that was way more than Six Flags as well.
Yeah, they sound impressive. Don't get me wrong. I just, if I'm going to visit Kings Island, do I want to do it when I can ride just Mystic Timbers, or a day where I can do Mystic Timbers, Beast, Fire, not Fire.
Oh, come on, yeah, you want to say it. It's okay, you can still say it.
I like Firehawk.
We like those Flying Dutchmen, we do.
I like them a lot.
When they're open.
Yeah.
Yeah, which isn't all the time, but yeah, their days are numbered. I mean, who knows? Do you think we'll see Batwing open again?
That's a great question. If it was at a different Six Flags park, probably.
Yeah.
The fact that it's at Six Flags America, and it's also conveniently tucked like back behind Superman, so you can just sort of put the gates up right behind Superman and been like, this part of the park's closed.
There's got to be some patrons who go there who have no clue that even exists there. That's just the weirdest park in that way, in so many other ways. So yeah, I don't think it's any kind of guarantee that that's going to open. And probably Six Flags America is 2 weeks away from opening. I don't even know if they've published it or if Batwing is even listed.
They're
I've got no
probably
clue.
gonna just like close it like Firehawk and just send the parts to Carowinds.
Interesting, a Six Flags park, and that there's no one else to sell it to, so that's who they do it.
They would probably just have to give it to Cedar Fair Park.
Yeah. And speaking of that, and this was so off topic, do you think they'll ever do the same RMC treatment on Roar? Could you picture them doing it? Because you would think it would be cheaper since they already have the plans. They don't have to redraw up any architectural plans, engineering plans. Do you think they'll ever do that at least as one big thing?
You know, it's really hard to say, because the best things that park has gotten in the past 10 years are new floorless coaster trains on their recycled old standard coaster.
Oh, gosh.
And like a spinning wild mouse. So it's hard to say. I can't picture them ever being like, you know what? We're going to put it in a ride here that people want to come to.
That's true. And a used wild spinning mouse, right?
Yes.
It wasn't even new. Oh, it's so sad.
Like, it wouldn't shock me if that park is only open because that's where Six Flags launders their money through or something like that.
Right. There's got to be some kind of racket like that. Definitely. There's shady underground dealings going on. Not that anyone would notice because there aren't enough witnesses to see that crime going on. They don't even have to hide the briefcases and the exchange of goods. Like, no one's going to notice. And that's one of the reasons we love that park. As much as that park gets trashed, we love it because we never have to sit in a line, ever. It's a great thing.
Coasters are bad, but I mean, I'd say it's better than going to Cedar Point and waiting in a 3-hour line to do one coaster. That's like 1 minute.
Which we really didn't have to deal with last year. As the In the Loop guys talked about, lines were shockingly short last year compared to previous years. That all the lines were taken up by Steel Vengeance, and all of the lines were completely empty, so that was pretty wild. Alright, well, that was about 10 different tangents there.
Welcome to my life.
Yeah, I love it. This feels way more like an In the Loop episode than a Theme Park Families episode, which I love. We need that variety.
As tweeted from @Drew the Intern.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. As tweeted from @Drew the Intern, international superstar, Cedar Fair Drink Cup for 2019 are orange because of Yukon Striker and Copperhead Strike. But we just had orange the year Val Raven opened. Care to discuss the unhealthy drink cup obsession?
I was going to say, someone's reading my Twitter feed.
This guy, he's all over it, right? Obsessively checking out.
I don't even have to.
With the move, did all of those cups on the shelf go away, or do you still have those?
Okay, so I had to make some, decision making. I still have all of them, but some of them are in, a storage tub in the garage, and some of them have made it up to the kitchen.
Wow, she's actually allowed them to come into the house, okay.
I didn't think they were going to, and I've sort of accepted that they weren't going to go up there, and she's like, no, that's your thing, they can go up there.
Yeah, okay. It's just memorabilia that makes you think of those parks, and that's the deal, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny, because I probably now have more in storage than I do actually up, because my kitchen definitely has less cabinetry than my old apartment. But there's still probably 10 to 12 up on the shelves now.
Okay.
versus I think there was like 40 before.
Yeah, who is that park that you actually tweeted, like, this is one that I'm missing from my collection, can you help me out or something like that? And you got no response, right?
I had one spot left.
Yeah.
And so I tagged pretty much every park that was opening up a new big coaster this year or last year. And I was like, who wants this last spot?
Oh, yeah.
They're like, we do. Come out and visit us. And I'm like, that's not what I was asking for.
Right.
I was like, send me one of your darn cups.
And no one did.
No one did.
Don't they know who you are? I mean, that's just rude.
The biggest coaster man in the industry.
Wow, that's right. Our top 5. Keep in mind, we're friends with Clint Novak, all right? You can't be saying things like that.
So the only park that has ever sent me a cup was the Amusement Park in Chicago.
Do you even know about that?
What is that?
There's something America, like Little America in Chicago too, right?
That's in Wisconsin.
Oh, that's Wisconsin. Okay. Amusement, like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know if we've ever heard of that.
All right, so backstory a little bit. Amusement Park, it's called Santa's Village Amusement Park. And they, a couple years ago, I'm going to say like 6 years ago at this point, reached out to the podcast and were like, hey, we kind of want to be on the show. We're opening up a new roller coaster. Do you mind having us on the show?
Okay.
And we had them on the show, and we were talking to this guy named Curtis, and we were talking about his new roller coaster. And then it was like a couple of months later where he then ran into Clint at IAPA, and he was like, hey, Curtis, I was like, oh my God, like I know you. Like we worked at Cedar Point together in 2009. And so like I just happened to know the like manager that would reached out to the show to talk about their new roller coaster.
Oh, wow.
And so it like rekindled an old friendship, and I probably talked to him like a couple times a month. He's a new dad too, and it's just really funny. He no longer works for the amusement park, but he reached out to the show having no idea like I was involved in who or anything like that, and we ended up becoming like friends again.
Wow, that's like the 3 degrees of theme park separation, something like that. Crazy, and I'm sure there's a lot of other connections like that you still have in the industry. So that's pretty. So they actually sent you the cup. So that's in your collection. Nice.
According to the map.
And along with
fine.
Real quick tangent. And along with the cup, they also sent me a lunchbox from the Crayola experience.
Oh, well, that is coming up. Okay, so, yeah, we are definitely going to ask about that. So, very cool. This is a source of gigantic fame for In the Loop. You know about the Crayola experience?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you've seen it, so, oh, that's cool. What was in that box?
It was just from Whirly Top. They sent him like a sample because they were talking about like different types of like the drink cups and plastic things that they were going to use, and Whirly Top sent the amusement park this like lunchbox, and they're like, hey, this could be part of your kids' meals or something. Okay. This is what the Crayola experience uses. And it just was the Crayola experience lunchbox. So he just included that in the box that he mailed, and he was like, and so it's just one of the funniest things.
That coincidence is crazy. And so now you use it, you bring it to work every day to bring your lunch to work, right?
Yes, exactly, always.
And everyone thinks it's adorable. Oh, look at Drew with his Crayola box.
According to the Mac Daddy Playa, Drew the Intern, something is happening at a Sesame Street somewhere. Care to elaborate, Drew?
All right, well, Sesame Street soft opened yesterday at SeaWorld Orlando for pass holders.
And so have you been able to go yet?
I did not. We didn't end up going yesterday, not going today. I think we're going to go Thursday night. We'll go to Sesame Street.
Okay, so this is great timing as this opens, as Little Holland Blitz is really going to start within a year, really understanding, appreciating, and loving these kind of things. So is this something that literally 3 years ago, it would have been like, oh, who cares? And now all of a sudden, this is a huge part of what you're going to be doing?
I think a little bit of both. Because, so as a kid, like I was really into Sesame Street. Like that was my show. Like, I loved Ernie.
Okay.
He was like my favorite character as a little kid, and like I had like the Ernie bath figures and all this kind of stuff.
Rubber ducky.
Yeah, so big fan of Sesame Street as a kid. So it was always going to be like a brand that I wanted to push off on Holland Blitz, because you try to like push your childhood nostalgia on your kids.
Of course.
And so it just coincidentally, SeaWorld is also opening this. And I'm a big fan of SeaWorld and all the things they do. So it all kind of worked out together. But I would have checked it out. I would have walked through it. I would have done like a video for In the Loop, but I probably wouldn't have made it back there as often. Because, it wasn't like I was cramming to go through Shamu's Happy Harbor either. But that being said, I think it's really cool. I mean, it's the first indoor meet and greet SeaWorld's ever done.
Ah, okay.
So nice climate-controlled air conditioning for that. A big store. I mean, it's a retheme of rides that, I mean, even if they were rethemed the same, they all really needed paint jobs and all this kind of stuff. They looked outdated, looked like they were all built in the 90s. So now this gives a modern, fresh look to a kids area, which is it's not a bad thing. So overall, I would say it's a better addition than most people are saying. Most people are like, it's just the same kids rides reskinned. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, fresh coat of paint, like nice new area, nice landscaping, all that kind of stuff seems really good.
So what is actually in the building? What features do they have inside there?
So it is, it's going to be the meet and greet of the different characters, and it's set up like you are going backstage and meeting them after their performance, so you're meeting them in their dressing rooms.
That sounds great. Very cool. And when you said you were a big fan of Sesame Street, it made me think of this, which is in some ways similar. Have you ever been to the Museum of Play in Rochester?
I have not.
Okay, so you heard of it before?
The name sounds familiar, but I couldn't tell you anything about it.
Okay, so because for the future, and not that it's really like the St. Louis Museum, I think it's very different from that, but at some point, and it would make a great in the loop, and if you're ever in Central New York, for instance, if and when you ever make it to Darien Lake again, or even Canada's Wonderland, this Museum of Play is an amazing, amazing place. It's all hands-on stuff about literally the history of toys throughout the world, and they have a huge arcade with classic arcade games and pinball machines, but then they also have a gigantic Sesame Street set that looks exactly like it, and there's all kinds of interactive things there. So it's just one of those things, if you're ever in Central New York, a really cool place to go, and that would make a great in the loop video, definitely.
All right.
Oh, and then one other thing I want to mention with Copperhead Strike, you think, and there's one thing we didn't discuss, wrapping up Andrew's news with our last one here, so you think the possibility of you getting a Carowinds in the spring might happen, right?
Yeah, it's probably happening. It's a matter of what group from here ends up coming. If it's just myself, if it becomes the whole family, and Lucy and Holland come up too.
Yep.
I think the date we discussed is probably the date we're going to be there.
Terrific. All right. We'll definitely be in touch as time goes on and make sure we coordinate that, and hopefully that works out. And then we can both give our reviews. So very, very cool. All right. Awesome. That's great news. There's really a ton of history with you and In the Loop that we do want to discuss. Before we get to that, some really exciting stuff here, and I know you've been posting about it recently. So FreeRT, if you could just discuss the background of that, and then the news that you can report as to this point. I'm sure there's going to be an In the Loop special where there's going to be the grand announcement, but what we can know as of right now with what's going on with FreeRT. So the history and up to date, what's the news?
All right, so it actually started back in the day when like Fury was new, and the YouTube funds were, YouTube was making enough money that we could sort of like pay for adventures, but we weren't really making any sort of like actual money, so it wasn't like anyone's real job. It still never is, but now we end up going on way more adventures than we used to. But it was like 6 of us that we were trying to like divvy up like what we were doing with, 6 or 7 at that point. Mm-hmm. And so it was like $50 here, $60 here, and it was like, here's your admission to the park, or here's part of your admission, and just things like that. And we were like, we really need to figure out a way to grow the fan base.
Right.
And then we also had the discussion where there's a lot of these enthusiast events that we go to, but at the same time, we probably would have just as much fun if we just had a small group and we ended up buying Fastlane for the day rather than the whole ERT. So we kind of wanted to come up with a way to rejuvenate the enthusiast event, and that was where it started. And it started with Fury, but we didn't really know where to go, how to go about talking to people. So that year came and went, and then it was supposed to happen on Lightning Rod. And we had a date, we had contract signed, all that kind of stuff, and then the ride didn't open. So then they were like, hey, do you want to move it to another ride? We're like, no, like we'll just push it back to the end of the year or whatever. And then we just ended, but then some of the group ended up just going to Dollywood that weekend anyway, others did not. So it was a washout that year.
And with that year, I thought it was really interesting what you guys did in terms of how you were going to choose who got to do the FreeRT. You remember how you set it up?
Yeah, so you had to, you basically filled out an application.
It was wild. It was like applying for a job. I felt so much pressure. I mean, I'm a teacher, and I felt more pressure applying to FreeRT than I did to get my job in a school district.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the logic here is we don't want anybody that's going to ruin the day. Like,
Yes.
I don't know how much into this community you pay attention to, but there's stories from, like, TPR trips where there's just been insane people on their, like, 2-week Asia adventure trips that are just, like, ruining the trip for everybody else because they're just wacky and stuff like that. And
Complaining.
So, throwing temper tantrums because they're leaving a park too early and they wanted to get more marathons on this and not go do that.
Yep.
Or throwing a fit because they were passing a mall that had a wacky worm inside of it to go to a full park and they're like, hey, there's an extra credit 45 minutes down the road, why aren't we doing that? Or Rob was really good at his, like, rider cam stuff. And if you weren't wearing the right outfit because he sells that video to, like, the parks and to IAPA for the manufacturers and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're wearing, like, a Fury t-shirt or something like that, they don't want you to be sitting in the front row of, like, just...
Some random park,
like Steel Dragon or something in China. They don't want you, or Japan, they don't want you sitting on that. So it was just, there's a lot of policies and things like that. And so they now are invite only for their trips. And we kind of took a model off of that where we were just like, we want to just make sure that, one, we don't want to have, like, too many people sign up and then we're like, it's slammed. And then two, we didn't want to I feel like if you let everybody go, then it would be too busy or nobody would end up showing up. So we kind of made it like this elusive thing where you had to apply, like create more hype for it and all that kind of stuff. And it was just, it was to eliminate, try to eliminate people that were going to cause problems.
And were you able to
create like an extra hype?
Yeah, were you able to see some of that through emails? Like, did some of that come out? Like, oh boy, this one, Drew, check this one out. This guy could be trouble right here. He could be complaining that ERT ended 2 minutes too early. Like, did you see that in some of the applications?
My favorite thing we got was it was probably like a 10-year-old that filled out the application, and he was like, I'm gonna go, and then whichever parent decides they want to take me, but I haven't asked them yet.
Well, Andrew wasn't old enough at that point to be 10, so that definitely wasn't him. But yeah, that's a little wishy-washy there. We went from that, and that didn't happen, and Coastal Radio had the same problems that year as you guys did. So then from there, the story continues.
Yeah, so then we couldn't agree on a coaster the following year. It was like Mystic Timbers, Invader, and like I had gone up to Mystic Timbers for Media Day, so it was like I don't want to come back to Kings Island to do that, and none of us were like jumping at the bits to go ride Invader. So it just, that year was a wash, and we didn't really even put any effort into it. And then came Drunken Vengeance, where we actually tried, and then the price point was just way too high, and we're like, absolutely not.
Right.
And, so like we were planning on renting out Steel Vengeance, and then the number was really high, and so we said, no, that's not going to work out.
And I'm actually glad it didn't. It was a fate that it didn't work out, because then, of course, you weren't able to do it anyway, and so it wouldn't have made that event as special without you being there. So it's great that it got delayed. So because of price, and thankfully Baby Hollandblood's coming, that didn't wind up happening. So we fast forward and continue on.
And it's happening this year.
What? Rue, what's happening this year?
I have signed the contract, so unless some crazy, like, oh god, I'm going to jinx myself here. So unless some crazy lightning rod-esque stuff happens where the ride doesn't open, it appears like it's happening.
It appears it's FreeRT we're talking about, dude.
Oh, yay!
Yeah. Now, I know you posted the picture of where it's at, and so that's going to be at which park again?
Kennywood.
Yeah, so it's going to be at Kennywood. Now, as you said, some crazy lightning rod thing happened. And so, thinking about that, if Steel Curtain, for any reason, doesn't happen, and it shouldn't because it doesn't have the same mechanics of launches and other things that certainly Lightning Rod had and other sensor issues and all that, it shouldn't. But would you think about Phantom's Revenge backup plan because that is still such a beloved coaster, or would you put it on hold? Do you think?
Well, so fun story. Kennywood is not willing to admit yet that Steel Curtain is going to be open. I've been in conversations with the right people, and they're like, yes, it's going to be there. Don't worry. It'll be open. No problems with that. Unless something crazy happens, it's going to be open.
Okay.
So right now we're actually signed up for Phantom's Revenge because Kennywood won't admit that Steel Curtain is coming in their group sales department.
Okay, it's the coaster that shall not be named.
Yes, it's basically Voldemort right now. Like, they're not talking about it. They're like, oh, we can't talk about that. So, pending the coaster opens, we'll be switching to that, obviously. But right now we are signed up for Phantom's Revenge ERT.
Okay, and so holding off on date for now? For your big announcement?
June 28th.
So June 28th, okay. So, with that, June 28th, so now fans know, and I'm sure you're going to be talking about it on the next In the Loop podcast as well. So with that, application process, are you going to be opening that up again?
Everything's internal right now. We're still discussing about how that's going to go on. It's really funny because there's like Clint Legend and I, we all never see each other anymore. So everything it goes through like group chats and whatnot. So we're still in internal discussions about how the process is going to work this year. But we at least have a date, and we have a ride, and we have a signed contract, which is better than we've had in a couple of years.
This is great. It's going to be a fun time, and it'll be great to hang out. And we've seen that through the Coaster Radio meetups that these can be great and friendly and not awkward and awful. So I think that should be a great day. And we love Kennywood as we've been there twice so far. So always a park that we like to get back to. So that's such great news. Awesome.
And one other thing that's great news.
Yeah.
Definitely, I'm working with the food and beverage team to get some kegs beforehand.
Kegs. What are kegs?
Beer?
Yeah. So you're down?
All right.
All right, that is great. I hear Pittsburgh, they like their beer in Pittsburgh, so all right, this is exciting, and I think the listeners just got a lot more excited, especially when you talk about that on the next In the Loop. Growing up in Rhode Island, sweet little baby boy Drew and Mr. and Mrs. the Intern, back then, how did you become a fan of theme parks, and what parks did you wind up growing up going to as a kid, both potentially Florida and that whole Northeast area?
So I actually moved a lot as a kid. So I was born in Philadelphia, but ended up living like the first 6 years of my life in Columbus, Ohio. I had like the home park of Kings Island, and then every year we took like a 2-day trip, stayed at the Breakers, and went to Cedar Point. So I grew up with like memories of that as a kid. Like I can remember like the year Mean Streak was open, and just sort of like looking up from my stroller and seeing Main Street at night. Like I don't really remember the rest of that trip, but I can remember like a nighttime profile of Mean Streak, and it was like shadowy and huge at the time, and like Raptor opening, and then Snake River Falls opening. So like all of these rides, like I grew up with those being like new and wow moments and all that kind of stuff. And so I grew up at Cedar Point, and then we moved to Kentucky, where Six Flags had just bought Kentucky Kingdom, and we weren't really familiar with the Six Flags brand at that point. We knew that they had a couple of parks and all that kind of stuff, but we went to Kentucky Kingdom, and then, because living in Kentucky, you still had Kings Island right there, so then those two became like our home parks. And I believe it was 98, we then drove up and did Cedar Point again, because why not? It's Cedar Point.
Yep.
And so, like, it was still staying in that area. And then I ended up moving to Rhode Island, and Six Flags again came into our play, because they bought Riverside Park and became Six Flags New England. So then again, I moved there again, and the home park got bought out by Six Flags. And so then we had Six Flags New England and Superman and all that good stuff. So it wasn't that I was like intentionally being into the theme park industry as much as it was something to do, and the kids seem to love it. So anything your kid likes to do, your parents tend to want to do, because your kid's happy, then you're happy.
Absolutely.
So we ended up going to those parks and all of that kind of stuff. And it really wasn't until I went to Cedar Point my first year as an employee that I really like came out of my shell and realized there was a bunch of other weirdos like me that really liked roller coasters and knew how many they were on. And a dream vacation would be like a 5-day road trip going to like 5 different parks and all this kind of stuff.
Was that part of your college experience, working at Cedar Point?
Yeah, so I had my freshman year at West Virginia, And I had so much fun in college that I didn't want to go home for the summer. Cedar Point has dorms for people to live in, so I just sort of applied, and instead of going home, I went to Cedar Point, and I worked on Maverick, and it's a great summer there, and went back to college, and I was like, you know what, like, I really like this theme park thing, and I don't really care for being in West Virginia, so I applied for the Disney College program.
Okay.
So year 2 happened. I went back to Cedar Point, opened Shoot the Rapids, and was on the Shoot the Rapids team. And then I finished my season a little early to go then move to Florida to do the Disney College program, where I worked the Pangani Forest Exploration Trail. And nothing is like a shot to the ego more than when you've been operating like the best roller coasters in the world at Cedar Point, and Disney's like, all right, you get to work the nature trail. Tell people about gorillas.
Oh my gosh. And by the second day, you were just deflated at that point.
Oh my god. There was no just magic there. Like, I might have been the worst Disney cast member they have ever had.
Oh no.
I can tell you, like, how bad of a cast member. So Disney is so, like, seniority based and automated. Like, nobody tells you what to do. A computer tells you what to do, so that way they don't have any union problems or anything like that. By my first week there, I knew how to manipulate the system in the computer, so, like, I didn't have to do as much work.
Oh my gosh. It was that bad.
Oh man, standing out in the hot sun, been like, this is a gorilla. And I was required to know 2 facts about gorillas.
Oh boy.
So I knew my 2 facts, and then people would ask you, like, all these kinds of facts. I'm like, I don't know. And, like, that's not an answer you can give at Walt Disney World. I'm like, I don't know. So then my answer was like, that's a great question. There's another gorilla viewing site further down. Maybe they know the answer to that question. And that was sort of my cop-out, like, hey, let me give you a positive spin on the fact that, like, leave me alone.
No, you went to the local library, you took out an 800-page book on gorillas and memorized every fact that one would know about gorillas. Of course that's what you did.
Yeah, sure, let's go with that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, but it was so funny. So the Pangani Forest Exploration Trail, it has Angolan black and white colobus monkeys, okapis, naked mole rats, a bird aviary, hippos, meerkats, and gorillas.
Yeah.
And so I had to know a little bit of information about all those animals. But then someone would come up with something like, hey, what's the gestation period of a meerkat? And I'd be like, meerkats have razor-sharp teeth that munch and crunch on bugs, snakes, and birds. They can dig up to 20 feet through concrete. The guy standing on the mound there, he's on guard duty. He's watching for birds of prey not to swoop down.
Yeah.
And I was like, and they wouldn't make very good pets because they're very territorial and pack animals, so they need to have several of them to be happy. I'd be like, yeah, but what's the gestation period? And I was like, those were my mandatory facts that I know the answer to. Have a good day.
Exactly, but you can't say that. I know.
Yeah.
That's amazing. After all these years, you still remember the spiel. That's a testament to how many times you actually had to say it per day. Holy cow.
Man, absolutely. Like, you have no idea. Like, so a legend really wants to do an adventure to Animal Kingdom where I've had way too many adult beverages and I wander around and tour people through the Pangani Forest.
Oh my gosh, just remembering the good old days. There's bleep and bleep over here, bleepity bleep, bleep, bleep.
Yeah.
At that point. That would be entertaining. You might get banned from Disney for the rest of your life, but it would be entertaining and maybe worth it.
Yeah.
And speaking of Orlando, though, growing up as a kid, how often would the family make trips down there?
It was probably like once every 4 to 5 year kind of adventure.
Okay.
Like I remember going the year the castle was turned into a cake, and then we went in 2000, and then I think 2005, and Expedition Everest opened, so I went that year. So I think I took 5 or 6 trips down to Disney, but it was always Disney. The only year that it wasn't only Disney was 2000 when we went to Universal, because Universal just opened Islands of Adventure. That was the only year that it wasn't just Disney. And so, I didn't even make it to SeaWorld until I moved down here.
So a lot of that stuff was fairly new. Take us through then, because college then eventually for you did go to Orlando, and then I assume there's the connection with In the Loop and how you got involved there. So for a lot of people like me who've only been listening for 4 years or 3 or 2 or 1, they probably don't know that origin story of how you got connected to them. Were you a listener and how that whole thing happened? Were you an actually intern, or was it just a joking moniker? So all those kind of details of college and then how you got connected to In the Loop, how did that all happen?
Yeah. So, I was definitely a listener, and this was back when the show was a live show, and Clint needed somebody to answer phones for him, and I just happened to be living in Lansing, Michigan at the time. I was unemployed, and it was like a cold January day, and I was like, I can do that. So I sent Clint a message on Facebook, because Clint, to grow like the popularity of Coaster Crew and whatnot, just Facebook requests every single person who worked at Cedar Point that summer. And so like I had like 40 mutual friends with him. I was like, who the hell is this Clint Novak guy? And so like I messaged him, and he was like, all right, can you start tonight? And I was like, yeah. So I did it. I answered phone calls for them and whatnot. And I guess I had more of a personality than most people when they were answering phone calls. And I also had the ability to like chime in on the show, even though like most of the time I was silent. But if they ever said something stupid or something like that, I would mute them, because I was basically running the show board. I'd be like, whoa, 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 and I would like come in and comment. And I guess they liked that enough that I just sort of stayed in touch.
What year was that,
That
approximately?
was 2010.
2010?
January 2010.
Wow.
I was the producer of In the Loop.
Okay.
And then I only stopped doing that because I went back to my third summer at Cedar Point to work the race car, Top Thrill Dragster, and obviously I couldn't answer phone calls and be running that ride and all that kind of stuff.
Actually, you probably could have, considering the amount of downtime that ride has. I think you could have done both.
2011 was a fantastic year for that ride.
Oh, okay.
It very rarely broke down, and that is the year for most riders per day, and most riders for a season was 2011 season. Never beat that year.
Wow, not only because of its reliability that year, but because you were a member of the crew. And
one of my best friends, Shirtless Joe, the two of us ran that ride together that year, and it pretty much ran pretty flawlessly.
If only you could ride Top Thrill in 2011. How old were you?
3.
Yeah, 3. You wouldn't have been allowed on the ride, unfortunately.
Nah.
All right, so go back to Cedar Point, and then eventually you reconnected with them?
Yeah, so then I was moving to Florida after the summer. Like, I'd already signed a lease. 5 of us were actually moving down to Florida together at the end of the summer, and 3 of us were doing the college program. I was not. I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing this Disney college program. I'll just find a job in Florida. And then someone else had the same opinion, where she was just coming down. She would find a job. But so the 5 of us had a lovely 2-bedroom apartment in Orlando, Florida, because we were all really poor, and we were going to be minimum wage ride hosts down here. And so we moved down to this nice apartment that we all slept on air mattresses, and it was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and it turns out Legend lived in the same apartment complex.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. Again, the 3 degrees of theme park separation. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'd never met him in person, but I just sort of met this one guy that, he's not a face character at this point. Like, YouTube really wasn't real at this point. This one guy always commented on, like, oh, you're wearing a Boulder Dash shirt. I like that ride. And stuff like that, just in the neighborhood. And I had no idea who he was. And then one day, Clint comes to town for IAPA, and he's like, hey, do you guys want to meet up? And so I met up, and that's when I was like, Jesus, you're my neighbor.
That's so funny. A small world. That's crazy. And so you got to talk to him, and then he brought you in at that point?
And so then Legend and I hung out a little bit. Still wasn't really involved within the loop all that much. And then came IAPA, and they needed a third participle, like someone to do the camera work and whatnot, because there was a big falling out of the camera guy the year before. That's a story that's not at all appropriate, but it has to do with the illegal film industry down in Miami, and
whatever that means.
Pretty insane stuff. So they needed a new camera guy.
Okay.
And so I kind of stepped up to the bait on that one, and I had to get out of class for the week because I was a college student currently at Valencia College. And I told my professor, I was like, hey, I have this networking opportunity, but I'm going to miss a couple of classes. And he was like, well, you can only miss classes if it's for your internship. And I just looked at him and said, okay, it's for my internship.
Easy answer, yeah.
And so that's where the name came from. And so we drafted up fake internship paperwork to make it look like I was actually employed by this media company that was part of this hospitality industry and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that just the name just sort of stuck after that.
Wow, and you've kept it all these years later. So it's the fake intern. I like it. That's hilarious.
I mean, at first I really was doing, like, intern things. Like, if you look at the earlier years on the IAPA videos, I was always in the stupid stuff where, like, I would get balls thrown at me or just any like, I was always doing the interny stuff, but I was never really, like, an official intern. At least I didn't ever think I was the official intern.
Right.
And then I ended up doing a lot more of the work as Clint got, like, more of an adult job and all that kind of stuff. And so I sort of transformed from intern to, like, secondary host of the show and whatnot, and just continued on from there.
More of an adult job. Do you think he has more of an adult job right now?
Not at all.
He plays with rides, and jokes with people, and plays video games. Yeah, it's still more of an adult job for him.